Among 20 emperors, 9 had eccentric preferences. How fond were emperors of the Han Dynasty of their male favorites? The King of Wei even, because of a coquettish remark from his male favorite, banned fishing across the entire country. Today, let's take you on an immersive experience of the male favorite beloved by the King of Wei. You were born in a small town of the Wei state. Your father passed away when you were young. Your mother raised you by weaving cloth. Since childhood, you had features as elegant as those in a painting. Your skin was as white as snow. Your voice was clear and melodious. The villagers all said you looked like a lady from a painting. Yet, you were unfortunately a man. Such looks did not bring you much good fortune. Instead, they attracted whispers and humiliation. You learned early on that the world has no mercy for the weak. When you were 16 years old, your fate took a sudden turn. The capital of the Wei state was engaged in large-scale construction, and boys skilled in singing and dancing were recruited everywhere to enter the palace, to serve as attendants. You were noticed by the local magistrate and forcibly taken into the royal palace. When you first entered the palace gates, it felt like falling into the belly of a giant beast. The sounds of drums and singing and dancing filled your ears, while power and prosperity unfolded before your eyes. You were just an insignificant pawn among the countless common people. Until one day, you were fishing by the pond in the imperial garden, and were spotted by the King of Wei. At that moment, your fate changed completely. The King of Wei looked at your hands holding the fish, his smile carrying a hint of amazement. This young man has an extraordinary appearance, like a celestial being. From then on, you were given the name Longyang. Starting that day, you were no longer a lowly attendant, but a favorite minister of the king. In the early days, you were immersed in the king's favor. The King of Wei let you sleep in the same bed as him, bestowed fine clothes and delicious food upon you, and all palace attendants addressed you as Lord. You seemed to have been pushed to the peak of mortal glory, but deep down, you knew that all this depended entirely on the king's likes and dislikes. If the king favored you, you were the most honorable young man in the world. If he grew tired of you, you were no more than a weed to be trampled on. A turning point came soon. During a trip, you accompanied the king on a boat trip along the river. Thanks to your excellent skills, you caught big fish one after another. At first, you were overjoyed, but the more you caught, the more anxious you became. I am favored today because I caught fish. What if the king meets someone new tomorrow? Won't he abandon me like throwing away a fish? Holding the fishing rod, the fear in your heart turned into tears, and you burst into tears on the boat. The King of Wei was stunned and asked you why. Choking with sobs, you said, "Your servant caught fish today, but I fear being abandoned. The reason I am favored is only because my looks are novel to you. If someone new comes, you will abandon me just like throwing away a fish." This was the first time you laid bare all your fears. The King of Wei was silent for a moment, then suddenly burst into laughter. But he soon turned serious, slammed the table, and swore, "From now on, anyone who dares to mention beautiful people in front of me shall have their entire clan executed." From then on, no one in the palace dared to present new people to the King of Wei. Your position, surprisingly, became as solid as iron because of this outburst of tears. However, this favor did not bring peace. Instead, it stirred up countless undercurrents. The ministers began to whisper among themselves, "The king indulges in male favors and neglects state affairs." You became the target of everyone's criticism in the court. Someone instigated the imperial censor to submit a memorial, satirizing the king for indulging in his fondness for Longyang. The memorial was burned, but you keenly realized that you were already standing at the center of a storm. You were unwilling to be just a dependent of your looks. So you began to secretly involve yourself in state affairs. When the king went on trips, you handled memorials on his behalf. When ministers requested an audience, you relayed messages for the king. Snotchily, a portion of the power of the Wei state fell into your hands. You tasted the flavor of power for the first time, which was far more intoxicating than the king's favor. Another turning point came. You used your power to secure official positions for your relatives in your hometown, not knowing that this would become a pretext for the ministers to attack you. Rumors spread everywhere, claiming that Longyang was disrupting state governance. Although the King of Wei favored you, he gradually showed signs of impatience. You keenly sensed his growing distance, living in constant anxiety. One day, the king held a feast for his ministers. When the wine had made everyone half drunk, someone intentionally or unintentionally mentioned a newly entered palace boy with handsome looks. The air in the hall froze instantly. The King of Wei's expression changed suddenly. and he ordered the execution of the man's entire clan. Blood gradually stained the golden steps, but your heart turned cold, for you saw a momentary hesitation flash in the king's eyes. You understood then, an oath could protect you for a while, but not for a lifetime. All your status and glory were just fragile threads hanging on the king's likes and dislikes. From that day on, you suffered from insomnia every night. You began to do everything possible to please the King of Wei, choreographing songs and dances, presenting rare treasures, even framing political opponents to maintain his favor. Step by step, you slid into the abyss. The final turning point came quietly. The King of Wei indulged in pleasures and neglected state governance, leading to frequent urgent reports of wars on the border. The minister shifted all the blame onto you, claiming that Longyang was a bad influence on the king. You became a scapegoat. The King of Wei was furious, but he was powerless to resist the joint pressure from the ministers. He loved you, but he needed his throne more. One night, a secret palace order was issued. You were sentenced to death by poison. The reason for your execution was stated grandly: disrupting governance and misleading the ruler. You sat upright in the candlelight, your fingers brushing the fine clothes the king had given you that day. Tears fell silently. You thought of your humility when you first entered the palace, the fear you felt during the boat trip, and that oath: anyone who dares to mention beautiful people shall have their clan executed. It turned out that this solemn oath was just an illusion, and your entire life was no more than a passing thought in the king's mind. The poisonous wine touched your lips. You slowly closed your eyes. Outside the hall, the night wind blew, as if the faint sounds of singing and dancing could still be heard. You were, after all, Lord Longyang, who had been favored by the king, and also a victim abandoned by the king himself. In the later memories of the world, your name was no longer vivid. Only an epithet remained: Longyang's proclivity, a term for homosexual preference. This is your story. It began with your looks, flourished because of favor, was distorted by power, declined due to slander, and finally ended in bloodshed. Your life was condensed into a casual illusion in later generations.